And now at this time, I invite Paul's brother John to come forward and share a eulogy. And following John's sharing, then I invite David Dreyer, a relative of Cindy's, to come forward and share some memories. So, John, you're up.
Many of you know it'll be a cold day in hell when I'm wearing a Sparty hat. Reverend just confirmed, heaven won. It's cold in hell today. That's long enough. Plus hats give me straight hair. It's a worry thing except for tea. Paul wasn't big on suits, so this morning I changed and he said, be comfortable. I'm going to try to be comfortable. Before I begin, I'd like to thank everybody here, Brian, and the Dutcher Funeral Home, and Reverend Cindy for your compassionate support over the last few days. And thanks to hundreds upon hundreds of family and friends who've expressed well wishes and sympathies to us. It's truly overwhelming, but it's needed at times like this. Paul and I were born 11 months apart, and we shared a bedroom growing up. Lisa, our oldest, was about 19 months older than Paul, and T was 13 months younger than I was. So I think their idea was if we cram them in close together, they'll become best friends. And maybe if we become best friends, we won't join those Marshall Street gangs that keep saving them from a lot of trouble. They were right about the best friend part. They vastly underestimated that latter one. As I sat there, I was hoping some strange calmness would overcome me as I came up here, but this is tough. But my voice carries the words of my sister Lisa and brother T as well. If I get through it, it's because Paul has my back for one final time. I Googled how long should a eulogy last. It says anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes. So unless there's any questions, I'll start to wrap it up here. I mean, seriously, like we're some rush to get to that procession thing. But I'm going to try to just walk through this room a little bit and lead my way with some thoughts and memories of the people that mattered most to Paul. I wrote a book. It's called A Eulogy for My Brother. I set about writing it to make sure that I shared everything you need to know about Paul. I know, oh crap, that's huge. It's also unique. It's a book with no words. Words don't exist that can adequately describe what Paul meant to us and why. When you remember a moment that was shared, you just don't remember the event. You remember how you feel about that event. And that feeling just can't be passed down with words. If you look at pictures with Paul, he's the one who, without fail, was always enjoying the moment the most. And it's not because he was just enjoying what he was doing, he was enjoying what he was doing, who he was doing it with. I do not remember a time with my brother Paul that did not end up in laughter at some point. We had the best swing set growing up all Green Street. It seemed like the slide was 40 feet high, but as I look back, it's probably closer to 5 or 6. But you could practically kick the clouds when you hit the high point of that swing, at the point where the swing started to buckle and felt like you might fall backwards. My sister shared a story with the family a couple days ago that ties together some of the innocent days of childhood to Paul's last day, Friday. I'd like to share it with you. Paul and I used to love to swing and swing. We used to sing to a tune we came up with, Mommy and Daddy, over and over. Countless hours. I remember to this day as if it was yesterday and feel how it felt then. I remember telling him how you can tell when God takes a soul to heaven. It's on a day when there is sun and clouds. Whenever you could see sunbeams through the clouds, that's when he was taking a soul to be with him. She went on my drive earlier Friday, I was reminded of it and thought of Paul. Through the clouds, tons of blue sky broke through. And then I saw sunbeams and felt the earth was smiling about Paul. A few minutes later, the sun was gone, the clouds turned dark, the earth was sad he was leaving. Paul's was a big book, but it has no words. Genuine is rare. I think Paul's friends that are here with us today, and thanks for coming, Daryl and Randy, Zook. A great adjective for Paul is genuine. He loved his Uncle Jim and his dearly departed Aunt Kathy. Paul enjoyed talking engines with Jim, but he used to love telling that fishing story, Jim, when you guys were up north years and years after you guys did that. Our Aunt Dolly and Uncle Al's homestead was a stopover on our way to Grandma and Grandpa's farm. Us boys have fond memories making that stopover. We would enjoy a sauna and a skinny dip in Brampton Lake, followed by some late night paddling under the northern stars. Paul, like the rest of us, loved the UP. He loved you both dearly. As you said, Uncle Al, I know you treasure his last trip in the UP this fall. I was golfing with Jim Taylor when he got a hole-in-one. I'm not sure what's more rare, a hole-in-one, or that I witnessed a hole-in-one golfing with the father-in-law of my brother. I'm so glad he pulled us together for our friendship, Jim. Thanks for you and Virginia for taking him in as a son. I know you guys have heavy hearts. Paul was a champion of enjoying everyone else's gifts. He just enjoyed being part of the experiences. The exploits of his nieces and nephews were followed closely, witnessed whenever possible, and I think anybody in the family knows that Paul was always the one with a video camera, capturing other people's moments. Denny, Val, Paula, John, Tim, you all shared fellowship stories and laughs with Paul. He easily became a brother to you all, and your sense of loss is just as great as ours. You have your own volumes, I know that. Denny, the police story is forever enriched in our family lore. He's been the biggest cheerleader in my life. Same with T, same with Lisa, obviously with his girls. It's almost sometimes he got more enjoyment from other people's feats than we did ourselves, and that's a unique gift. His easygoing demeanor and evidence to his genuine personality, he was true to himself, which made him true to others. Yes, genuine is indeed rare, and Paul is genuine. Green Street. It's been said if you survive childhood, you'll have enough to write about for a lifetime. Our youth growing up on Green Street fills 6 more of those volumes, all about words. One of them involved us 3 boys and is not for public consumption. Childhood and neighborhoods are curious things to reflect upon as you age. Names like the Warries, Zukis, Pattersons, Woods, Lanes, Delanos, LEAs, Zabluskis, Williams, Maduris. Perhaps we didn't have much, but we lacked nothing because of our friendships. The possibilities of outside back then were only limited by our imagination. And if you were asked to come out and play, you never asked play what? A time when you only had to check in for lunch, dinner, and bedtime. And bike rides weren't for exercise, they were for discovering our universe. A time when first and third base were spigots, and Paul's the only one that knew that wasn't spelled like crickets. Look it up. A time when we were glad our dad was more interested in growing boys than grass. A time when we leaned on Paul to change broken windows before Dad knew they existed. A time when trouble lights lit up our court, the clothes dryer could revitalize a frozen basketball to allow us competition in the winter. A time when sidewalks framed our street football field, garage beams made for great goalposts, and telephone poles were permanent first down markers. Green Street was a huge part of our lives, including Paul's. Dimensions. The dimensions of our relationships extend to the level that we're able to share our gifts with others. Paul had a gift for understanding how things worked, and that added dimensions to many of his relationships. Uncle Jim's mechanical engineer, Jim Taylor with your cars, you knew that. Each of us boys could play with our hands. Paul could also work with his. Our grandfather was a farmer in the UP. Some of our fondest memories growing up are carefree days of youth on the farm. Our grandfather was a revered figure by us kids. We would all cry our own tears when it was time to return home. He was skilled as a mechanic, as many farmers must be. Grandpa recognized early on that Paul had a gift for seeing how things worked, and he knew that's the key to being able to fix things. Meanwhile, Grandpa could see early on I couldn't be trusted with much more than a screwdriver. And the T was probably somewhere in between that, but he was also left-handed and had other issues. We had a baseball game the three of us played on that farm. We played it hours on end. But sometimes Grandpa would come and grab Paul as he needed help taking apart an intake manifold or something. Perhaps as a young lad, I had a bit of envy that Paul's gifts allowed for a different dimension with my grandfather. Although an equally strong argument could be made that we were just a little bit ticked off that our legendary three-man baseball game had to be redone into two. I think T probably still remembers the look on Paul's face coming out of that machine shed working with Grandpa. It was wide grin, and he had greasy fingernails, and he wasn't that old. But I also remember Grandpa's grin. Him being able to share in school one of his grandsons about the mechanics of things was something that he truly enjoyed, and it was a grin reserved for his dimensions with Paul. As I left the hospital for the last time on Friday, I made a left turn and headed home towards Marshall, feeling the need to see my folks. I took the long road, had a good visit. When I was ready to leave, Dad was working outside in the yard. By now, the day had turned gray with a chill setting in. We chatted for a bit, not directly about Paul, but we touched the edges of some things related to the day's events. And then he shared some stories about our garage. As I was about to leave, he wanted to show me something specific. He opened up the garage door and started showing me a section of foundation he had poured probably 50 years ago. It involved laying some bricks in the foundation in a certain way, how it was poured. He chuckled a bit about the fact that he came up with the idea on his own. In 50 years, he's never felt the need to tell me about that section of the garage. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy listening to my dad and every story he tells. But I couldn't help but think Paul probably knew more about those bricks in that section, probably knew what makes them unique. Gotta admit, Dad still haven't figured that out. Maybe you could loan me a screwdriver. As he wrapped up, Dad had a slight grin as he gazed at the floor for a second. I couldn't help but smile my own painful smile. In that fleeting moment, I think maybe in his own way, he knew he was talking in Paul's dimension for a final time. When there isn't a chance for goodbye, all you can do is find a way to let go. Paul had dimensions. Inheritance. We were fortunate that our parents allowed Paul to enjoy his inheritance early, and that wealth provided him great substance he was able to spend his entire life. Of course, his most valuable inheritance didn't involve money. Our family is 100% finished, and that heritage has been passed on to us kids, and we all embrace it as part of our own identity. Paul was proud of his finished heritage and had no lack of opportunity to learn more about it from our family patriarch. Cindy mentioned a t-shirt the other day that was very fitting for Paul. You can tell a Finn. You can't tell him much. There was a Finnish sweetbread called misu that's been a staple in our family as long as I remember. I tried making a loaf one time. I had trouble with the rise. Came out like a brick, and that took a lot of work. It's hard for me to imagine, but this time of year, Paul would make like a dozen loaves for the family. It wasn't just that he was baking bread for others, he was baking our favorite bread. He wasn't baking a snack, he was making our day. And that made the effort worthwhile for him. He'd even deliver it to Sturgis. He also knew that those loaves would lead to sibling warfare, some being fought over, possibly hidden, and he really got a kick out of that. He also knew as soon as I would get my loaf, it'd be toast. Literally, toast and eaten. Mom and Dad, in addition to our heritage, Paul also inherited so many of your best traits. And he has been a good steward of that inheritance for his whole life. He was the one you trusted to be there, whether it was to fix a faucet seal or help you heal. He was the first call you could make, and since he always answered, he was the only call you ever really needed. He loved you both dearly. T was telling us how much he and Paul hugged his kids. Usually those hugs resulted in his T's arms being up in the air because Paul was putting him in a half Nelson to keep him and I from fighting. Blessed are the peacemakers. Who would have thought that would entail Paul constantly having to dull the weapons of our choice? The four of us were inseparable during those formative years. Mom and Dad, you had a beautiful daughter. She was smart, smartest of us kids. And Paul loved her. One of the fondest things I found out in these past few days is how Paul and Lisa shared a unique bond growing up. They often played together, just the two of them. Now I'm assuming that's because T and I were grounded, but at least they made the most of that. At least I felt the love shared between our sister and oldest brother over the past few days, and I have to say it's a love in its purest form. You got that from him from you, and it's yours to keep. He also protected you, not so much from the rest of the world. God only knows the tormenting T and I would have heaped on her if Paul wasn't there to intercede. Mom and Dad, you had 3 sons. We were generally known as the Worry Boys. Fortunately, we were able to keep the family name out of most of our shenanigans. You had 3 sons, and your pain from losing one is unimaginable. But the Worry Boys will always be Worry Boys. Brother love is a bond that can't be broken, not even by death. Brother love is forever, so forever is our bond. You had 3 sons. You will always have 3 sons. Thanks for bringing the best one, Paul, into this world. The anvil. T used possibly the best analogy for describing Paul. It's that of an anvil. They look cool, they're solid, they're unique. They get used to forge other things. An anvil has no fear of a hammer. They bear strikes. Sometimes in life you have to decide if you're the hammer or the anvil. Our brother Paul always chose the anvil. He was mental tough. He was solid. He was grounded. And he was always there, just waiting for a need to rise. Paul was the anvil. You needed something built, Paul would build it. You need something fixed, Paul would fix it. Whether we needed faster bikes for chasing fire trucks or just cooler looking bikes, Paul would take them apart, put them back together again. T and I once put a basketball hoop on the garage using nails. We thought we did a great job, and it probably was for us. Paul got the biggest kick out of what we did. He was still telling that story just a couple of years ago. But he also had fun redoing it correctly with lag bolts or something. He truly enjoyed fixing our incompetence, and we gave him plenty of practice. The purpose of an anvil is to be used to help shape other things. That matches Paul's unwritten message to the rest of us. Use me. I am strong. I am solid. I can help shape you. You know I am here. I am the anvil. You need me. If I can help forge you into something better, something stronger, something more useful, I'm your man. I'll do it quietly. I'll do it repeatedly. I'll do it whether you are looking or not. And I will enjoy doing it, as proven by my laughter. Paul was an anvil. He helped forge our family. It continued into marriage, into his fathering of his children, and throughout his professional career as well. At the end of life, it's always a question, what's been given of oneself? And the anvil responds, I made a difference. What did you make? Paul was an anvil. Ruth. My parents gave Paul birth. His childhood developed him. In his early adult years, he found opportunities. But it was Cindy Taylor Worry that gave life his meaning, his life meaning. And it is you, Cindy, that had the most profound impact on his life. While we talk about all the ways Paul impacted us, you impacted him. Yours was a perfect match, a comfortable love centered around family, friends, sports, special pets, Scooter. Children and dogs loved him. That's about the finest thing as you can say about someone. Because dogs know and children feel. Dogs have a sixth sense of who they can trust. And children are drawn to kindred spirits. T. Lisa and I have been sharing how deep our void feels. And then I think, you loved him like no other. And I think of your void, Cindy, and it crushes me. I know that you know God. So you know in the midst of suffering is where we find the provisions of God. God's plan for the redemption went through a widow. Ruth is in the genealogy of Christ. Even as Paul's purpose is completed, here yours is not. And the God of the Bible is a God that defends the cause of the widow and cares for her suffering. And that's for the rest of us to figure out what that means. We will care for your suffering, continue to pray for you. Thank you for your vows to him. And thanks for loving my brother. We love you very much. Pep talk. Taylor and Haley, I'm sure you know how proud he was of you. And he was always talking about you to others. Everyone knows that you filled his life with great joy. He loved telling the stories about how he had to save the day and he had to drive 6 hours to get to you. Like anything else, he just laughed off those inconveniences. You shared going to Michigan State games, family vacations, you had daily calls with your dad. He coached your teams. You have many, many volumes. He knew your love. There really isn't anything more important than that. It's worth repeating. He knew your love. He told us. If our roles were reversed and Paul asked me what he could do for my children, I'd ask him to give them a pep talk. So here's my favorite of Paul. You gals get to say it's hard, and you'll be right. Because that's what adversity is. Difficult stuff gets put in our lives and it makes life seem impossible. So much of our walk with Paul is in our rearview mirrors. But for you, your dad was in the front windshield of your lives. He was your GPS, the wipers, the headlights, emergency flashers, service technician, making sure you could travel the long road. Your paths are harder than anyone else's in this room. And it's going to take a strength that no one else in this room has, and no one in this room will even know. So you need to find that power within you that will allow you to keep driving the long road of your lives. And you have that power. It's everything your dad showed you, taught you, demonstrated for you, everything he stood for, everything we're crying over. He gave all that to you personally. You have the power. It's Him. So now you have to become a chip off the anvil and live your lives trying to match up to the dreams He wanted for you. And the dreams He wanted for you are the very dreams you have for yourself. So keep living your dreams. That includes your dream with Rob, Haley. You two have the hardest path, and you have the greatest source of strength. That combination makes you the strongest people at your father's funeral. Remember that. You're going to do great, because you've always wanted to do great for Him. That's the end of the pep talk. I did my best, Paul. Taylor and Haley, I truly meant every word of that. But I also know this is no game, it's real. Last Friday, Tay, Rob, and I were in the hospital parking garage while Cindy and Haley were in with Paul. In Paul's last moments, we passed Tay's phone around and we all had a chance to say something to Paul. My last words ever to my brother were a promise to watch over his girls. You're not alone. You'll never be alone. I hope you feel the love that exists for you. He may no longer be your coach, but he's still your biggest cheerleader. May God watch over both of you and bless you on your long, long roads. We all love you. Before and after. Before this funeral, we have had an amazing amount of love and support showered on our family. And it's gotten us through things until today. In a short while, a casket will be lowered, the vault sealed, the grave covered, and this family will slip back to our homes and try to rejoin the normal world. But we won't have normal anymore. While the world will buzz around us, we will be stuck with a sense of nothingness. And here's where that nothingness will take us, right back to before Paul's death. And we will try to find today's normal in the days of the past. Maybe it will work for an hour or two, maybe even a day. But then we will have to return to after Paul's death. And it will take us right back to nothingness. Before death, joy. After death, nothingness. Before funeral, love. After funeral, nothingness. Feel how empty nothingness is. Please do not accept that Paul's death ends in nothingness. There is one other before and after story that contains good news. At one time, this whole world was lost and empty, full of sin. Life ended in death, and nothingness did follow death. That is before God sent His Son Jesus into this world. Jesus then lived the perfect life we cannot, died the death we should, all to save us from our sins. It's because of the cross Paul gets to share in Jesus' victory over death. Before Paul's death, joy. After Paul's death, cross out nothingness. Pencil in grace. And it's an amazing grace. How sweet it sounds. Saves a wretch like me. And it saved Paul. And it has saved you too if you know Jesus in your heart. And it's in that grace, and it's only in that grace, that we place our hope of reuniting with Paul again someday. And grace is why we celebrate his life today and not mourn his death. Sparty on. I mentioned earlier that Paul and I shared a room together growing up. That was a great deal for me. You see, Paul worked at an early age. I played. Paul saved. I spent. Paul bought a TV and an air conditioner for our room, so I enjoyed some great comforts at his expense. Sounds like the Paul you guys know too. As we got bigger, that room got smaller, but we weren't just sharing space. We were sharing each other. Every night from the time I was probably 3 or 4 until Paul went away from college. some point before I dozed off, he would say, "Night, Jay," every night. Later in life, when we were apart after being together, he would just say, "See you, Jay." Sparty on, Paul. I hope you know what we would get to see you again. Sparty on, Paul. I hope you know how thankful we are for you. Sparty on, Paul. I hope you know we want to be more like you. Sparty on, Paul. I hope you know how much you meant to us. Sparty on, Paul. I hope you know how much you were loved. Sparty on, Paul. I hope you know how much you'll be missed. Sparty on, Paul. I hope that you know that you were beautiful. Sparty on, Paul. I don't hope. I know that you rest in eternal peace.